Let me start with a story that happens inside companies more often than people like to admit, because if you have worked in a leadership environment for long enough, you will recognize the pattern immediately. There was a leader everyone admired. Let's call him John. John had built a reputation inside the company as the person who moved faster than everyone else. When situations became chaotic, when a deal started collapsing, when a project went sideways and nobody wanted to make the call, John was the one executives looked at. He was decisive, confident, and comfortable making difficult decisions while everyone else was still trying to understand what was happening. A few months earlier, John had just saved one of the company's biggest accounts. The client was about to walk away because of a supply chain breakdown that nobody seemed able to fix. Deadlines were being missed, costs were rising, and the relationship was starting to fracture. Instead of forming committees or launching another long analysis, John pulled the key people into a room, evaluated the options quickly, switched vendors, and pushed through a new execution plan within 48 hours. The account stayed, the company celebrated. John became the example of exactly the kind of leadership organizations claim they want. But the celebration created something nobody noticed at the time. It created an expectation. The company did not simply reward the outcome of John's decision. It rewarded the method. Speed became the story. Decisiveness became the brand. John was no longer just a capable leader. He was now the man who could solve crises instantly. And that is where the trap begins. Because once speed becomes the identity of a leader, slowing down starts to feel like failure. The organization starts expecting instant decisions, instant direction, instant solutions. Every new challenge becomes another stage where the leader is expected to perform the same heroic act again. A few months later, the company faced a different kind of crisis. A competitor released a surprise product that threatened to disrupt a major segment of their market. The pressure inside the organization escalated quickly. Executives wanted a response. Sales teams wanted reassurance. Customers were asking questions. And once again, everyone turned to John. John responded the way he had been trained to respond. He moved fast. He accelerated development of a competing product, pushed the timeline forward, shortened the research phase, and asked his team to move immediately. Concerns from engineers and product managers were raised, but John was confident that speed mattered more than hesitation. The faster they responded, the faster they could protect their market position. 3 months later, the product launch collapsed. The system was unstable. Customers reported problems. Support teams were overwhelmed. Refunds began stacking up, and the company lost both revenue and credibility. The same leadership behavior that had once been praised as bold and decisive was now described in very different language. Suddenly, John was not decisive. He was reckless. He was not bold. He was careless. But here is the uncomfortable truth. John had not changed. The environment had changed, and the leadership style the company has celebrated finally exposed its hidden cost. Modern business culture has developed a deep fascination with speed. Leaders are constantly told that the market moves faster than ever, that competitors move faster than ever, and that the only way to survive is to act faster than everyone else. In this environment, hesitation is framed as weakness, while immediate action is framed as strength. The language companies use reinforces this belief. Move fast, fail fast, ship fast, decide fast. Leaders are encouraged to believe that the person who acts first is the person who wins. What almost nobody talks about is the hidden tax that comes with this obsession. When organizations reward speed above all else, leaders gradually stop prioritizing understanding. The most important step in decision making quietly disappears. Leaders stop asking deeper questions about risk, about long term consequences, about structural weaknesses that may not be visible in the moment. They move because movement is expected, not because clarity has been reached. This creates a predictable cycle. The faster the leader moves, the more the organization praises decisiveness. The more praise the leader receives, the more pressure they feel to maintain that image. Over time, the leader begins making decisions, not just based on what the situation requires, but based on what the organization expects them to be. Speed becomes identity, identity becomes pressure, and pressure gradually erodes judgment. At the same time, another problem begins developing quietly inside the team. When leaders move too quickly and dismiss concerns in the name of urgency, people stop offering honest feedback. Engineers hesitate to raise technical risks. Analysts hesitate to challenge optimistic projections. Managers hesitate to question the direction of a project once the leader has already committed publicly to it. The team becomes quieter, not because they have nothing to say, because they believe nobody is listening. And when a leader loses honest feedback, the quality of decisions deteriorates very quickly. This is why leadership built entirely on speed eventually becomes unstable. The leader becomes isolated, overwhelmed by constant decision pressure, and increasingly dependent on instinct instead of thoughtful analysis. Some decisions still succeed, but the margin for error shrinks. Eventually, one mistake becomes large enough to expose the weakness in the system. That is usually the moment when the organization suddenly starts blaming the same leader it previously celebrated. The irony is that real speed rarely comes from rushing decisions. It comes from clarity. There is a principle often used in military strategy that explains this very well. The phrase is simple: slow is smooth, and smooth is fast. At first, it sounds contradictory, but the meaning becomes obvious once you understand how decision-making actually works under pressure. When leaders take the time to observe a situation properly and understand what is actually happening, their decisions become cleaner. Cleaner decisions lead to smoother execution. Smooth execution reduces mistakes, reduces rework, and reduces the need for emergency corrections later. Over time, this actually creates more sustainable speed than constant reactive decisions ever could. The problem with the act fast culture is that it encourages leaders to skip the thinking stage entirely. They move directly from problem to action without spending enough time understanding the environment they are operating. It looks impressive from the outside because movement is visible, but internally it creates instability. Leaders who perform consistently over long periods of time approach decisions very differently. They move quickly when the situation is clear, but they slow down deliberately when the stakes are high and the information is incomplete. They understand that not every decision carries the same level of risk, and they adjust their pace accordingly. This is where many modern leadership environments struggle. Everything is treated as urgent, everything is framed as a crisis, everything is pushed through the same accelerated decision process. Over time, that environment burns people out. Leaders begin making decisions while mentally exhausted. Teams begin operating under constant pressure. Reflection disappears because nobody feels they have time to pause. And when reflection disappears, learning disappears with it. Breaking this cycle requires a different approach to leadership. The first step is recognizing that not every decision requires the same speed. Some decisions are reversible and low risk, which means they can and should move quickly. Others create long-term consequences that cannot easily be undone. Those decisions require deeper thinking, broader input, and a willingness to slow down temporarily in order to avoid costly mistakes. The second step is rebuilding honest dialogue inside the team. Leaders who want strong decisions must actively invite disagreement. They must ask what risks are being overlooked and what assumptions may be wrong. When people feel safe raising concerns, the leader gains access to information that would otherwise remain hidden. The third step is protecting time for reflection. In a culture obsessed with constant activity, reflection often looks like inactivity. But thoughtful leaders understand that reflection is where learning happens. It is where decisions are reviewed, mistakes are understood, and patterns become visible. Without reflection, the same mistakes repeat themselves again and again. The modern business environment will probably continue celebrating speed, because speed creates dramatic stories and simple narratives about leadership. But the leaders who survive over long careers usually understand something deeper. Speed without clarity eventually becomes chaos. The goal of leadership is not simply to move faster than everyone else. It is to move with enough understanding that when you move, the direction is right. So the real question every leader eventually faces is very simple. Do you want to be known as the person who moves the fastest in the moment, or the person whose decisions still hold up years later? Because the difference between those two reputations is not talent, it is discipline. The discipline to pause when everyone else is panicking, the discipline to listen when everyone else is rushing, and the discipline to remember that leadership is not about reacting faster than everyone else. It is about understanding better than everyone else before you act. If this perspective resonates with you, Share it with someone who believes speed alone defines leadership. Conversations like this are how better decision cultures start forming. And if you want deeper discussions on leadership, strategy, and decision making under pressure, join the Destiny Architect Telegram chat, where we explore these ideas with leaders who want to think clearly instead of simply